Mike McCool here. I'm in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is Nadine and Joel Fernandez. They are operating a new high school in Berryville, Virginia, called the Living Nazareth High School. And I told Joel and Nadine, I said, I thought high school is a strange way to start off a private school. And Joel, why don't you go ahead and tell us why you selected high school?
Yeah, so for one, it's actually a much more rare opportunity in the area and even really across the nation. For some reason, there seems to be a lot of fear and trepidation for private schools to tackle the high school years, whether it's dealing with those particular teenage years or adequately preparing one for college or just handling the subject material, that level of expertise. For whatever reason, there's a lot of hesitation to try and minister to that group, but really, ultimately, the answer is that this is the age group that we really felt God calling us to minister to. We felt that there was a need. We can talk about this more, but I approached my spiritual director about these inspirations, and we prayed and thought about it for a while, and finally, he kind of gave me a confirmation that, yes, I think this is really God's will for you and you should start moving forward with it. And that's really when the high school was born.
So is this, Nadine, why don't you, what's your role at the high school?
Well,
the jack of all trades, right?
I know, I've in the past I've actually asked Joel about that. Okay, I'm obviously a mom of 3 little ones, and that's my first priority. But he's like, well, if you look back at the Bible, we have Moses there and we have Aaron, and you're my Aaron.
Well, they always say, you're a good helpmate.
There we go.
I always say, between the successful man, behind everyone is a woman pushing him.
So essentially it's jack of all trades and just trying to fill in. And a big part right now is trying to get the word out to families.
That's available. You're seeing that during this COVID part of our life and business, that private schools have really taken a leap in attendance. I think parents are not going to, they want this in-class instruction. And it seems like the private schools have stepped up and done what's necessary. And I think you can do that with smaller class sizes, which most have, and more personalized instruction. And I think that's what parents are looking for. And again, I think in the high school thing is what's lacking in a lot of schools, not all the schools, but some specialize in, K through 6th or K through 8th and don't tackle that high school because it's tough. It's tough to do high school. And so what's setting you apart now? What kind of programs are you having? What's your attendance? How's the public reacting to your new school?
Well, yeah, I have to say that it's a very unique model. We operate on what we're calling a contemplative model, and what that means is that we're really trying to prioritize the spiritual formation of our students. We want them to cultivate and nurture the interior life in them. And that is our absolute first and topmost priority. As some of our advertisements say, we're not simply a college prep school, we're a heaven prep school. The idea that the student's first vocation, as all of our first vocations is to be in communion with God and all the saints in heaven. And if we fail in that, it doesn't matter whether you get into MIT, Harvard, Yale, or anywhere else that you want to go, we've failed in your formation process. And so that is really the keystone or the hallmark of the education we're trying to provide at Living Nazareth. Now, lots of other schools will sort of share that ambition and say, oh yes, we totally support that, we're 100% behind that. But we're noticing that in the traditional educational model, there's not a whole lot of space to really concretely make that a priority. And that's what our model is trying to do, is say, yes, not only do we have this as a priority and we desire this, but we are going to take concrete measures to make the space to allow this kind of formation to happen. So what does that look like? Well, we emphasize the use of the sacraments. My wife and I are both Catholic. This is a Catholic high school. We want the Mass to be available for our students every single day. We want confession to be available. And then in addition to that, we're trying to have regular spiritual directors come in so that it looks a little bit more almost like a seminary or a house of formation for a religious order or something to that effect. I remember very fondly, I spent a year in seminary up in Boston, and I remember even after I discerned out of the seminary that thinking that this was an amazing formation, and it's a shame that many people miss out on this simply because they're not even discerning a call to the priesthood perhaps, but this is a formation that any young man should receive and will assist him in whatever vocation he takes on, whether it be married life or the priesthood or anywhere else that God calls him. And so that is really a lot of the inspiration behind how we're running the model. Also, like in a seminary or a university, the classes are actually spaced apart. No two classes are actually going to be back-to-back to each other. Something that I saw way too much of in my own career as a teacher was students, immediately being shuffled from one class to another, and their heads are still spinning from the first one. Or, I'll look out at my students and I can see them, visibly reciting to themselves facts that they need to regurgitate on the test in the next period, and they're not even mentally present in my classroom. And at that point, it's like, all right, well, what, how are we exactly educating our students if we're not even using well the time that we're given? So a lot of the philosophy behind our model is to use less time, but use it well. And that way we'll actually both improve the intellectual formation of our students, and we actually give them a great deal more time with their families, and we also create a space in their lives to be able to nurture the life of grace, have periods of communal prayer, and really foster that kind of devotion, which our hope is the families are also trying to do in the home well before they get to us.
Exactly. Well, family life is important in our education. That's something that's really missing, I think, sometimes is the family support of any student, of private or public. I know my son-in-law and my daughter are both teachers, and they're very disappointed when out of 63 students, only one parent comes to a parent-teacher conference. So that really, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but, I can remember when I was going to school, it had been the other way around. Maybe one parent didn't show up.
Oh, yes.
Mom and dad were there, and that's part of our problem now is we have, single parents, we have hard parents, both parents working. It's tough to raise kids, and then especially in high school, people figure that your kids are old enough to take care of themselves, and that's really the age where they really need their parents. I can remember when my wife was at home when our kids were in the 15, 16-year-old, you wouldn't think they would really care. But you know what? Even though when they got off school at 3:30, they really looked forward, the days that mom or dad wasn't there, you could tell. It's almost like they have an expectation. Maybe it was only for 5 minutes, but, I think you could tell the difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in our children's life. Don't abandon your children because they're in high school age. That's a critical age of development. I think
that actually, brings up a point, too, that one of the distinctive factors in our school that we are encouraging families to, be a part of the school day and to actually audit classes with the students to learn together if they would like to. So that's something that some parents have right away when
they're on board. Huh?
They've said, "Oh, I would love to come back and learn Spanish," and
and to speak even further to that point. And it's also something that we hope to involve parents in the leisure periods. The idea being, I spoke before about the classes being spaced apart. In between these are guided leisure periods. So it's not simply, all right, we're going to set, a bunch of, 14 to 18-year-olds, loose and do whatever you want for half an hour. It's, the teachers and some parents in the community will guide them in particular activities of interest to them. So they might, do a poetry reading. They might do an improv music session. Some of them might care to just go to the chapel and actually spend extra time in prayer there. Others might want to care to share their favorite board game or take them out across the street to Hobart Park and play basketball, or a pickup game of basketball or do some swimming in the pool or something like that. So the idea is that we want the parents to be a part of the regular school life and even their siblings to come in. We welcome the siblings to come and take part in these leisure periods as well. The idea is that you don't learn apart from your family per se. You're learning alongside them and together with them. And we recognize that there are times that the students need to, kind of separate and focus and be attentive, and that's where the class periods are. And, but aside from that, there's no reason that they can't actually be a part of their first community, their family, through most of the school day and learn alongside them. And to be honest, some of those younger siblings, from having had those experiences, might be all the more enriched by the time they get to the level of being able to take classes at school. And we're all going to be the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, I'm personally looking forward to, we did a lot of drama growing up and looking forward to including younger siblings in that,
You're waiting you can't wait until you get these 3 little ones over to the high school. I can see that's coming. I can tell that you're preparing. So what kind of class size is typical?
Yeah, we are opening up this year. So our plan, though, is we want to remain a small school. We want to remain a school where everybody knows each other's names, is personally familiar with each other. And to that effect, we don't want to grow above any more than about 50 to 60 students tops for the whole high school. So that being said, we're running, at a tops of about 15 students per class. And we don't want to get really any higher than that. In my own experience, that's about the level where, it remains manageable. Beyond that, little bits of chaos, or to varying degrees, depending on how much further you get above that level, can start to creep in. And also it becomes very hard for a teacher to actually maintain a more personal relationship with a student once it gets beyond that size. I know, I've known several teachers who, in the process of writing comments for their students, either on assignments or for report cards or any number of things, just default to this, same 2 to 3 sentence generic statement and, maybe switch out an adjective or two to try and personalize for the student. And we really want to try to get away from that jadedness and that complacency. We want the teachers to really have a good personal relationship with their students and be able to give, thoughtful and relevant feedback to them. We also, on that same score, want the students to take on a personal responsibility themselves in the classroom, so that it's not, teachers sort of reporting back to parents and kind of, being the spies, the hired spies on their kids, so to speak, but that the teachers are really giving feedback to these young adults that are taking ownership of their own education, and we're expecting them to share the relevant parts of that with their own families, who are going to be, hopefully, a very integral part of the entire process. And so, again, it's part of, the whole family kind of learning together, coming together, and not, all right, the teacher, snitches on the student to the parent, and the parent is in awe about the fact that the student hasn't told them anything for, 2.5 weeks about a failed test.
Right, exactly. No homework, nothing's been assigned, haven't learned anything today. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? So have you incorporated an online program as well? Are you doing any online, or is it all going to be in the classroom?
At present, we don't have any plans for online education. That might come into play. I know everybody's kind of on pins and needles with all the COVID stuff and what's going to happen, but we really want to, the Holy Family is our model for this. That's why it's called Living Nazareth High School. And so obviously they, had that in-person connection. There's something, as great as the many online tools that have come across are, there is still something that is missing when you don't have that personal element. I mean, even this interview that we're doing right now, it would be very different. Obviously, we're speaking to people who are going to be viewing us online, but we are still in the same room.
Exactly.
And this interview would probably look a little bit different if we were speaking with you over, a Google Meetings or a Zoom or, anything else.
It's not quite the same.
Right.
It's not quite the same. Yeah. Well, it sounds like that this is your first year, and so this is the hardest year.
Hopefully.
So, but we have to get the word out, and we have a large Catholic community in our area, and there are several schools of different types. Some elementary, some full. We have some Seton Home Study. I mean, they do it worldwide on for homeschooling. We do have a large homeschooling network in this area, and it sounds like you've found a niche that will be fulfilled by this community. Sounds like that's the case.
Yeah, a lot of people have approached us, and, they'll compare us to one or more of the high schools that exist in the area. It's like, oh, are you guys doing something like this? Are you doing something like that? Or aren't you worried that you're, starting a high school a little bit too close to these people? And are you and we tell them the same thing every time. It's like, we don't view ourselves in competition with these schools at all. There are going to be families that appreciate this model and are going to want this model, and it's sufficiently different from anything else that's being offered that if they don't particularly care for the model, I'm happy to recommend them over to this or that other high school.
Exactly.
In the area, and say, hey, you don't, it sounds like you're not particularly receptive to this model, or it sounds like this is not the best fit. But here's a few other suggestions of other possible good fits, based on what you've described. And in a certain sense, I feel that way about, I feel like almost every school in the area can say that about themselves. There's enough distinctive characteristics about each of them that families could very easily find what they're looking for, I think, in this area.
Well, it sounds like your model's a little different, and it seems like it's has a tendency to be more leaning to the faith-based side compared to a more traditional, the nuns cracking your knuckles with the ruler, right?
Yeah, we're hoping to...
That's what people think of as soon as you say, oh, we have a Catholic high school. Wow, the nuns are going to be there. Don't tell me you grew up with...
I don't have any such stories. I actually grew up in public school. I was not a Catholic for most of my life, actually, and converted to it in high school, actually. Not having anything to do with the high school that I went to. I went to a public high school in Miami, Florida. But it was largely through, actually, a girl I was dating at the time, and then the youth group that she invited me to. The man running the youth group is now my godfather. He's the one who kind of sponsored me to enter the church. I still have a good relationship with him, and, interact with him, somewhat regularly. And so... that is not my experience. I know my stepdad has all these stories about the nuns that did this or that.
You were one?
I had a couple of years in a Catholic high school with sisters, but they were the most loving kind ever.
There you
so
go.
I didn't have that experience.
So not at the Living Nazareth High School. All right.
Yeah,
So.
but however, I did experience just having a really full day and hours of homework afterwards, and hitting the point where I wanted to just come home and do dishes and be a part of the family a little bit more. So that's something where in this whole process I was like, there's so many great points of in education, and how can we try to blend all of this together, and
Well, I think you found something. I think people will, if this is what they're looking for, you're offering it, and I think that's what's great about this country, that there's so many choices. And I think with private education is growing, and I think this COVID time in life is going to really increase our private school enrollments, because people are not happy with the public schools. And I think that when the politicians just let go of the purse and allow the money to travel with the student, I think you'll see a dramatic improvement of public schools and a major influx to private schools. So I think it's always about the money. Let's speak about the money. Is this an affordable thing for people to attend to? Or
I mean, first of all, I just want to say I agree entirely with those sentiments, and I add on to that I think a lot of families who might have been afraid to do anything else besides public school because that's the only thing they've known have now been forced out of that comfort zone. And say, we can actually get along in a situation different than public schooling, and I think that's going to contribute a lot to what you've just said. But in terms of the finances, that is actually a big point in our school. We want to be able to make this available to any student who wishes to come. We are looking right now at having the tuition at $8,000, which for the year, and with discounts for families, so that if they're enrolling multiple students, they'll get discounts for each additional student. And we found that that's actually competitive with, if not far less than most of the private schools in the area. And that's something that I think Nadine could probably speak more to, because she's actually been the big push for that. As far as our deliberations, because she remembers, she comes from a family of 8, and she remembers it, being very difficult when you have to kind of decide, we want this particular enriching, extracurricular activity for our children, or a Catholic education, or I don't know if you want to say a little bit more to that. But
It was always an issue of finance, and obviously even, when we came to the decision of what our yearly would be, we know that still is, in many ways a lot, and, but we're trying to create a situation where, we're spreading the word now, looking for donors, making that, something that we can try to make it even more affordable than that. But it's also very important for us to be able to pay our teachers as a just wage. And so that's where that's come up. So we're in that balance, but trying to make it simple too, where we don't have a lot of extra fees. Like that is our base fee, and it covers everything.
You won't be nickel and dime throughout the year.
No.
And that, you mentioned donors.
So.
There's a lot of people that will donate to a cause that they may not have any children at all, but that are members of your faith that want to contribute to. They're buying into the model, and they think it's a great thing. And so don't be surprised if you have a few angels out there that will come your way.
We've had one already come, which is
out of the blue,
huge blessing. Right? Yes.
But you mentioned though about class sizes, and once the class size gets a little too large, then it's more about managing the students, just moving them around the building, so to speak. And the education side gets a little pushed aside. I always use the example that, there's a lot more good teachers than excellent teachers. And I say that an excellent teacher to manage 40 or 50 or 60 students compared to someone that can manage 10 or 15, that's kind of there's a lot more good teachers out there.
Oh, yeah. No,
goodness.
Yeah, and we've, in talking about class sizes, we've looked back. I mean, our faith is full of, stories of the saints who, St. Don Bosco is the one who comes, immediately to mind, where, working as a priest in Italy not too long ago, he would gather hundreds of young boys, and these are not, model students. These are, he took them out of prisons and off the street, and, and he was able to captivate, them with not even a building sometimes. He would just take them out into the woods and, preach to them and let them play, sports and games and play along with them. And that is amazing if we are sent, certain saints that are able to do that for us in our classrooms. I know that, that call is few and far between, though.
Well, and the education comes, like you say, in the family and by the personal example you lead. And I think that's where you're teaching all the time. When you have a staff, regardless of whether it's your school or private school or public school, I can remember teachers I had in high school that were really an example of their faith, and they led that even in a public environment. And you can remember those, and you can appreciate that.
Oh, yes. And sometimes a student will learn and remember far more of what's done outside the classroom than anything that's mentioned in the classroom.
Well, you have a website, livingnazareth.org.
That's right.
And so if you have more interest into this high school model that Joel and Nadine are talking about here, check them out online. I noticed I seen your banner across the street in Front Royal, so I appreciate that. It looks good.
Thanks for printing that.
Yes, I'm putting a plug in for National Media Services. You're having plenty of interviews. You're having programs to introduce prospective students into your school.
Yes, in fact, there's one more scheduled this summer, and there'll probably be one more that is just strictly Q&A. But the next scheduled event will be on the 31st. It's the Feast of St. Ignatius of Loyola. And in honor of his feast day, we actually have one of the spiritual directors who's going to be serving our school, Father Kevin Stolt of the Institute of the Incarnate Word. He'll be coming over and giving a talk on the Ignatian Discernment of Spirits, a very central theme in the spirituality of St. Ignatius of Loyola, which is very central to the spirituality of the Institute of the Incarnate Word, of which he's a part. And as a side note, this was a completely providential assignment. I came to the Institute of the Incarnate Word as I had come to many a religious order, asking for their prayers and their assistance in any way that they could provide for our school. And the superior of the order contacted me back and told me that he would like to meet with me, and we had a great meeting, and he said he'd like to assign a priest to me. And little did I know that the priest he was going to assign to me was actually an old buddy of mine from college that I hadn't seen.
Small world.
I hadn't seen in probably a decade. And so we met with him recently, and he's fully on board to begin spiritual direction at the school, and he's going to kind of kick things off with this event for us. So that's Friday the 31st at 6 p.m. at our campus in Berryville.
All right. Well, check them out online, livingnazareth.org, if you have that inclination to find out a little bit more about your school. And I appreciate you, Joel and Nadine, for coming and talking to us and letting our community know about it.
Yes,
all right.
And thanks for hosting us.
Sure.
Yeah,
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Well, thank you.